We all have somebody in our life who drives us a little nuts. They either make us feel annoyed, like they're kind of sucking the life out of us, or they make us feel angry and provoked, or maybe they just hurt our feelings and kind of shock us. Or sometimes they're those people that are behaving in a way where we're worried about them. And we're almost it's like we're pushing a rock up a hill because we care more about their well-being than they seem to care about. And then we also have those people when they walk in the room and you think, well, who died made you God? So usually when I even say that, a whole group go, oh yeah, I have somebody like that. Redirecting negative behavior is it's an alternative to the way we typically respond. When you think about it, most people, they feel angry or they feel hurt or they feel worried or they feel insulted or they feel annoyed. And our typical reaction is to be harsh, withdrawing, punitive. All of that.
Yeah, when I left this job, I left it in less than 3 weeks. And I sent her a pretty little note card and I said, Donna, just a little note to tell you, in my 40 years on this planet, you are without a doubt one of the most mean-spirited, rude, I can't even remember everything, people that I've ever had the misfortune to meet. That said, congratulations, you're a success.
Okay, did you like anybody in that office? Did you like anybody?
A couple people.
Okay, guess what you just created for them? Go ahead and say it out loud.
When given the demanded competition or put down, they act even more self-righteous, competitive, superior, insufferable, or cocky. Create subtle sabotage of team and create lose wins.
That's what you you helped further.
Oh.
So most people, they think if you take away punishment and you take away like inducements like carrots and what else is left? So redirect is a technique where people understand a specific type of misbehavior, what's causing it, and how to have influence on that behavior that ends up healing both parties and creating greater closeness.
So the first thing, why we can't afford misbehavior. Well, things are changing very rapidly and we have a lot of goals. We have a lot of things we want to accomplish and we have a lot of challenges around complexity and how to manage things through these big, massive changes in software development and digital transformation and artificial intelligence. Also, the diversity of our world is more obvious to us now through technology, and we're also more aware of where we have barriers. We have barriers of all types, diversity of religion, race, etc. Another goal and challenge is just people themselves. How do we attract good people into our lives, into our workplaces? How do we develop them? How do we engage and retain them? We tend to think of them as this finite pool of people that are talented. And in all reality, if we knew how to develop people well, they would be that top talent. We also have a need to stay innovative, to stay relevant and ahead. Out of the Fortune 500 companies that were started in 1955, only 26 of those still exist today. So it's a real concern, especially as things are changing so quickly. And of course, today we're going to talk about poor behavior and what some of those costs are. But also, what do all of these challenges and goals cost us in terms of stress and wellness and health costs and absenteeism? And there's a lot of people that have a smile on their face and they have that mask on, when deep down inside, they're often in a state of feeling inferior. The psychology that we're going to be talking about throughout this webinar, and that is based on the work of Alfred Adler. And he was the guy who actually coined the phrase inferiority complex. And what he said is that if you don't create a certain type of conditions and conversations, people will go into this complex where they feel worthless and inferior, and that causes them to go into a spiral of uninterrupted struggles, both internal and external. And if you look at the news, you see that we have, high levels of healthcare costs, and we have addiction, we have too many kids on medication, and external struggles are the struggles that you see in just about every area of our communities. You see it between religions and politics and between families. And it's all of this, I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose. All of the sexism, genderism, racism are all coming from this state called inferiority complex. So here's a really important thing to know about misbehaving people. A misbehaving person is always a discouraged person. Now, I put these pictures on here because these pictures don't look like people that are really discouraged. They just look arrogant or lazy or self-centered or bratty or whatever. But I just want you to take my word for it so that you can consider closing your mind to focusing on their weaknesses, and instead build on the assets and strengths within people, because if they're discouraged, it won't help to heap more discouragement on them. We're all social beings who we need this sense of having belonging and having significance in our life. And when we feel those feelings of belonging and significance, the emotions we experience is we experience ourselves as empowered. That's power within. It's not power over people and it's not power under people. It's that sense of power within where you have a voice, where you can influence, where you know you can make your mark on the world. It's also feeling lovable. And lovable is different than feeling loved. He's saying the feeling we get when somebody receives us, when somebody sees the way our mind works and sees the way our emotions are happening and finds that fascinating and delightful. So it's more of a receptivity. Instead of lavishing love on people, they might just need to be seen and heard. It also is a feeling of needing to be connected. So if you think of some of the biggest misbehavior, like school shootings, most of the time they can trace back that those kids that did those shootings felt isolated and felt disconnected from the larger community of their peers. And so that has a very detrimental effect. And also, this one and lovable, I think, are often neglected and overlooked more than the other two, and that is to give people more opportunities to contribute. Sometimes that misbehaving person needs to be asked more of, rather than, taking more away from them or thinking that they need a break. They might need to do more contributing and to be seen and heard. So think about if there's a person that's in a gang, and maybe that person has been told that in order to stay in this gang, they have to go out and shoot somebody to be initiated. If the only place that they feel empowered, lovable, connected, and contributing is in that gang, they will override their conscience and their fear of imprisonment. That's how powerful these needs are. And so I want to tell you this, that in the prison system, for example, we have what's called recidivism rate, which is re-incarceration rate. And that rate, oddly, is similar to our disengagement rate. Recidivism is around 60 to 70% in all prisons nationwide. Where Adlerian psychology was used in a prison in Florida, that recidivism rate dropped to 4%. And I will tell you that in the client sites where we have done this Adlerian work, we have seen a similar dramatic change in misbehavior and disengagement. What we do to each other and to ourselves is we put people into what we call the monster box. The monster box is, oh, I would never go kill somebody, so you're a monster and I'm not a monster. You're a bad person and I'm okay. We do this with people who are misbehaving, and it's very harmful to them and us. So what they did in this prison was say to the inmates, we're no different. You're not a monster. You're not any worse or better than me, except for you believe that you only had a limited amount of ways to get these 4 core needs met. Since we're all more alike than different, let's work on a different way for you to get those met. You need to understand what is underneath misbehavior so that you can be more effective in resolving it. So Adler said, not only are we social, but we're self-determining. We are always creating our reality. So what does that mean? That means that we have a lot of stuff underneath the visible behavior that we're doing to kind of create certain outcomes. So when a misbehaving person is misbehaving, like that guy that's in the gang, he's shooting people, right? All we can see is his behavior. We don't see that he's in that gang because he's trying to get his core needs met, unless we just take that as fact. We have to realize, wait a minute, this guy's behavior makes sense to him. And it makes sense to him because he's formed a certain set of values and beliefs that he's come up with on his own interpretation. And then he is going to think and feel certain thoughts and feelings that will inform and reflect in his behavior. So a person that's a positive influence in the face of that has to be able to build that trust and rapport. So I gave the example of people that could sit down with an inmate and say, look, you're no different than I am. You're not in the monster box. They're building trust with that person that has done really awful behaviors. And sometimes it happens in the moment that you can build that trust. And absolutely, it happens every time you're redirecting. What you're doing is you're actually recognizing problems and faulty thoughts and feelings that come from fear and discouragement, and you're facilitating values and beliefs that come from fear and discouragement all while at the same time satisfying the core needs. We typically don't do this positive influence thing. So I just want you to be aware of, to be an influencer, you have to switch it up and kind of at least remember this is all there under the surface. So I just want to go on to another concept that Adler said. He said, not only are we self-determining and social, we're subjective. And this is so big because we all kind of believe we all think like each other, and we actually don't as much as we think. So this is where that iceberg model showed the value system and the belief system. And this is how we develop our belief system. We have all these events happen to us, and we make interpretations of what those events mean and what we think is actually going on. And then we create emotional and physical responses to what we're interpreting. And then we make actual decisions about it. And then we will start to form like generalized beliefs about life and men and women and work and power. This is the most tricky part. Once we form those beliefs, we actually will provoke life to prove that our belief system is accurate. So we'll actually start to influence the events in our lives to reinforce what we believe. So an example is the guy that was in the gang. Maybe he interprets that to be a man, you have to be violent. Maybe that's what he was programmed to. Maybe that's what he witnessed. Men have to be tough and be, aggressive to be a man. And maybe he has certain emotional and physical responses about that, and fears about, like, what are my options? I can't cry. I can't do a lot of things. And then he'll actually set up a dynamic in his life where he will cause events that keep reinforcing his violent belief system, until somebody comes along and breaks that belief cycle. This belief cycle is happening all the time in positive ways and in negative ways. If you're having a positive reaction to your interpretation, that's awesome. You wouldn't want to interrupt it. But when you're doing redirect, you're actually interrupting belief systems that are in play. And I know I'm using a very extreme example with that gang member, but I want you to know that in very small ways, we're interrupting cycles and feelings of fear and discouragement. While you don't have to be a psychotherapist to redirect negative behavior, you have to have more understanding than we typically do about behavior. So one of the crucial pieces is to understand that we're also very purposeful in every moment of our lives. What you put on your body to wear today, what kind of shoes you're wearing, your body language, everything is to accomplish things that you're mostly unconscious about. Why does this matter to misbehavior? It's because there are goals that happen around misbehavior. And misbehavior is a little more complex, and there's one cause and there's one solution. So the example I want to give to show you is, let's say this is a young man who's at work and he was asked to do a task. And his boss is now coming to him going, hey, you didn't do the task. What is your problem? And he's upset with him. And you can kind of see he looks like he's in trouble. Well, he might not have done that task because he has a pattern in his life that if he doesn't do certain things or he does certain things, he gets undue attention. You've probably seen kids that are constantly, come on, stop dawdling, pick up your book bag, get moving. There's a lot of times we're misbehaving unconsciously because we want that attention. It could be that we're in what's called the goal of power. I remember I was dating a man one time and I said, hey, just out of curiosity, why aren't you wearing your safety belt? And his reaction was, I'm not letting the government control me. So sometimes a person may fail to do a task because they're in this, no, I won't, you can't make me mindset. It could be that this young man is in this state of mind where he's very prickly and he's very, just stay away from me kind of energy, just reject me kind of energy, because he's in some kind of a dynamic that causes this mistaken goal. And it's not power or attention. And sometimes the person isn't doing that task because he doesn't think he can. And he's so afraid that he's paralyzed and not taking responsibility for what's there to do. And sometimes it's a play on, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm okay, so I have to act puffed up like I'm more important. Oh, that assignment is too beneath me, or I didn't think I had to do that assignment. I'm not going to be like everyone else. I have to be special. So can you see how the same presenting behavior could have 5 different goals behind it that you may not be aware of unless you understand that those 5 goals exist and you know how to identify them?
A harder example is when people are in a goal called the goal of significance. It tends to be people that are very high asset, very smart, very talented, and you really can't usually fire them or get rid of them. Sometimes they're even in leadership or ownership. And what happens is their subconscious goal is to get people to invalidate them. But what they do, the way they do it is they act very superior, very critical, very entitled, and everybody does want to take them down, you know. But if you understand that redirect, what you can say to them is, I know you've done all these wonderful things, and I would suggest that you maybe ask our group if what you're saying right now is helping the team, or if there's something else you could be doing to help the team. So you're acknowledging them, you're acknowledging their assets, you're acknowledging their strengths, you're acknowledging their words, because they're going to up the ante. They're going to say, well, why do I have to do that? I know what I'm saying is important and everybody should learn it. So you'd want to mirror that. You'd want to say, so I know you think that what you have to say is really important, and it is. And I can see where you'd feel like we should just kind of get on board with that and listen. The challenge we're having is we need to feel like everybody's on the same page as a team, and we need your help with that. So you're not invalidating them, but you're inviting them to be in service rather than competition. And that's very hard to do when they're playing out their misbehavior, because we tend to want to run the other way and just go, I'm just going to ignore that person and hope they go away. But they don't. And in fact, if you give them the invalidation, it makes them worse.
So I want you to really rethink punishment, because I gave you that example of the guy in, you know, the recidivism rate in prisons. I know that's a very extreme example, but it's very real. And it's also a macrocosm of a microcosm. So Adler said we're always trying to find these 4 core needs. He called them a felt plus, because deep down inside, we're holistic. We want to be our whole selves. So when we keep these going and we're in relationships and conditions that create this, you have to ask yourself the question, does it ever make sense to really add further discouragement? So I just ask you guys to consider that. If it's true that we're holistic and we're creating all this stuff, trying to get to this good place, wouldn't it be helpful to put down further discouragement? But I want to give you these quick takeaways. Remember, when you're facing anybody that's misbehaving in any way, this person is discouraged. They're in the inferiority complex. So the most important thing you can do is not join them in it. If you only do that, you've done no harm. And to do that, you just have to breathe and slow down. Remember, if discouragement is present, you want to encourage yourself and the other person, because that way you're working against kind of the energies that are in play. As much as you possibly can, start looking for practical, specific ways to actively support and promote the conditions and conversations that protect those 4 core needs. And that also means sometimes removing, like we talked about. As mushy as it sounds, work on creating intense positive connections on purpose. Einstein said we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So if we take him at face value, we can't solve our problems if we keep using the same control models and all the same small thoughts about one another that we used that got us in this place and has kept us in this place.
You have to be in a state of emotional intelligence to recognize when somebody does something to you, oh, that's one of those patterns of their discouragement. It's not anything about me. So that is why emotional intelligence is difficult, because you have to be self-aware and self-managing, aware of the other person and how to manage the relationship with them. So there's a whole bunch going on in a little bitty exchange.
Services. I have noticed a staff that is happier, more productive, and working better as a team.
They understand when I say something, there's a framework that we have a common understanding of.
I'm not causing that power over or power under, but that we have a mutual respect for one another.
Even at the senior level, we started finding ourselves being able to communicate better, being able to trust each other more.
I know this program made a tremendous change in our business.
So the Lifeworks model it's everything. It's packed full.
Having a system in place allows everyone to know how to behave, how to act, and how to interact.
A great thing for our organization, and really we started to see those results.
It has taken the company to places of better engagement, better collaboration, better teamwork.
We're hitting our targets and we're much more productive in that fashion.
The culture here has gotten so much better. I love coming to work.